Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we have a Mythic Plus guide for Retribution Paladins. A little bit different from the main Ret guide. We're going to focus solely on Mythic Plus, big numbers, big AoE, and all the kind of things you're going to want to know. To do that, there's a lot of new Mythic Plus players I'm seeing this season, so hopefully I can help some people out with this. So just like my normal Ret guide, we are going to try to make this guide pretty inclusive for those new people we just talked about, but also if maybe you are doing higher keys, the 10s, the 11s, the 12s, maybe if you're super pushing, maybe you don't need a video like this higher than that, but a wide range of keys here. Maybe even if you're doing Mythic Zeros and you're not that high eye level or whatever, range of people, let's say. So we're gonna try to keep it pretty inclusive. We're not gonna try to talk about simulating too much. And all that kind of stuff. Just like my other guide, because I might have new type of people in here for Mythic Plus only. Sometimes I will say something pretty sweaty. I hope that doesn't go over your head. Sometimes I'll say something pretty casual because I'm trying to, talk to that audience. I do my best, basically, to make everybody happy. If I don't, oh well. Other than that, we can go ahead and get started. It's going to be slightly different, like I said, from the main guide. I'm not going to assume that you watched the main Ret guide in this, although I might reference it from time to time. Let's go ahead and start with the stats for Mythic Plus, right? What stats are you going to be wanting to get? Well, first of all, like most things, strength is going to be good. Eye level is good. It's more stamina too to stay alive. And strength, they did nerf our mastery just enough to make strength become our best stat. So eye level is pretty much always good for you. There will be times where it would be a DPS loss, but generally speaking, eye level is going to be good for you. Secondary stats do matter as well. When it comes to secondary stats, just like in single target, just like in overall on the regular Ret guide, our stats going to pretty much be the same. It's going to be mastery is going to be your number one stat. Then we're going to have critical strike and haste. They're about even, and they both also top off at a certain number, right? Critical strike, once you get into those mid 20s, the low 20s even sometimes, that starts tapering off quite a bit. Haste, you can push that haste closer to 40 and have it start tapering off less. However, in Mythic Plus specifically, in AoE situations, I do tend to like a little bit more crit. Crit does very, very well when you're hitting lots of targets. So you can, maybe try to keep those even, but try to keep them at a respectable number. And then versatility when it comes to DPS is going to be your lowest thing. If you are struggling, now Mythic Plus is a place where you have to survive. So if you are struggling bad to survive, you can weave versatility into your build. It's going to lower your DPS, but it will help you survive. That's for every spec, by the way, in the game. You can always add more versatility to stay alive more if you really, really need to. Let's go ahead and so that's basically the stats, strength through verse, and that's going to be the stats that we focus on, the stats that we use in Mythic Plus. Next, let's go ahead and talk about hero talents and our talents. So luckily this part should be pretty easy because I was already going to tell you to use Herald of the Sun for Mythic Plus even before they fixed the bugs and made it a little bit stronger. They since nerfed it by one of the abilities by 15% since then, but it's still going to be by far the best thing to use in Mythic Plus. It's not even going to be really close. I don't really recommend using Templar for anything in Mythic Plus. You could in some dungeons, especially pulling slow. You could definitely make an argument for it. If you're pushing really high keys, you're pulling one pack at a time, you could make an argument for it at least. But for the purposes of this guide, we're going to just focus solely on Herald of the Sun as our hero talent. So Herald of the Sun, what does Herald of the Sun do? It puts Dawnlight on targets. Dawnlight is a dot. It's going to do quite a bit of damage. It did get nerfed. And then the other main thing is the final talent is Sun's Avatar. So what that does is when you have your wings activated, it puts a beam of light, of fiery light, between you and your Dawnlight targets, and it burns anything touching them. So you essentially, and we can show this just really quick here actually, by just using our wings. And so we're going to use Wake of Ashes. Now you can see this beam of light on me. Now if I want this to hit this target, I have to drag it through it. So it does require you positioning yourself a little bit there. And so that beam will be burning this target as well here with Sun's Avatar. And so that's basically how you use that. You do want to position yourself. If you see all the lines coming at you, but they're not touching anything else. So let's say I had a line on all three of these items, all three of these dummies in front of me. Okay. So I have a line coming here to me, and straight to me, okay? I'm going to need to move a little bit to at least get maybe 2 of them to hit through the lines. So you're going to want to try to converge those lines. If they're spread out, you want to try to make them into one line if you can, and that'll be going through the most possible targets. And that's kind of how Sun's avatar works. And that's a lot of damage. It's just burns, 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 burns. You have 20 targets, you can burn 20 targets if they're stacked up enough. If you have a DK mass gripping or a Demon Hunter gripping in with their little sigil, that really helps Sun's avatar. I will say that. Up here, we're going to normally take Gleaming Rays. This is a utility. I guess it doesn't really matter the ones that aren't choice nodes because you just have to take them. So we'll take Gleaming Rays. We take Will of the Dawn, and I'm taking Blessing of Anchi, or I'm saying that wrong. I apologize. Somebody told me how to say it, but I already forget. So we're just going to say Anchi again, A-N''S-H-E. We're going to use this even in Mythic Plus as long as you have the weak aura. I made a video about this, but I will put it down in the description below of this guide as well, of the weak aura. If you do not use weak auras or you refuse to use weak auras, then I suggest using Lingering Radiance, okay? So if you can use the weak aura, use the Blessing. If you can't, use Lingering Resilience. It's so strong, even though it's a purely single target, it just is so much damage, and it'll add a lot of damage on bosses. It's a very, very strong ability. I hope it doesn't get nerfed. It's actually kind of cool. So I hope it doesn't actually get nerfed or anything. So let's go ahead and jump into the talents now. So we will focus a little bit more on the Paladin tree than we normally do in the regular guide. And I will link this particular build. There'll be some switches up to it you can do, of course. But I will link this particular build below with the weak aura. So up here, we definitely want Lay on Hands. We want as much utility as possible in Mythic Plus, right? We want Lay on Hands. We a lot of times want Cleanse Toxins. There'll be times where you don't need it. So this is a movable point, technically. We want Devotion Aura. It's very likely you'll be the only Paladin in your group at any given time. I take Obduracy for a little bit more survival. However, you can remove Obduracy if you need to put a point somewhere else. You need something else really, really bad. You could remove Obduracy. I like to take it for survival. It's also worth noting, before we go any further on the Paladin trees, Paladin tree is getting changed in 11.0.5 at the end of October or early November. This Paladin tree is getting changed. I'm going to do an update guide for the... I think I'll just do an update for both, and I'll say this is for Raid, this is for Mythic Plus. And we will do that when that time comes. We still have, a couple months before that at least. So, but when that time comes, we will do an update guide. I say that because I see some talents that are going to be changing and made me think of it. I always take the Divine Seed talents. You do not need these extra 2 talents in Mythic Plus. It's very rare that you have to do a lot of, or a long movement in Mythic Plus. Now, it's very common that you have to do a movement, so if anything, you'd want to get the 2 charges, but it is more rare that you'd have to do a long movement in Mythic Plus. So that's something you don't have to take. You're always going to want to take your Kick, Rebuke over here on the right side, and then over here on the left side, in pretty much every case, you're going to want to have Blinding Light, at least to have it. This is just going to disorient. You're basically going to use it as an interrupt, or not really an interrupt, but just a short-term interrupt. 3 mobs are about to cast at the same time. You can use Blinding Light, and at least they'll just start casting again, but they'll start casting from the beginning again. It can save you a second or two to get proper interrupts or proper stuns and things like that. All right. And now we can move down here to Holy Aegis. You're going to have that critical strike chance, Avenging Wrath, of course, Justification, and now we get some more utility. You're going to want Blessing of Sacrifice. You're not going to always want to use this, especially on the tank, right? You might just die. But in just a healing intensive place where I find that using this useful, because it can kill you, right? Or ultimately be the cause that causes you to die. Where I like to use this is one of those fights or one of those pulls where there's pulsing damage. And the healer, a lot of times, especially maybe if they're not the best healer, they're keeping the group up, but they're kind of letting themselves fall, or they're not paying attention to their own health while trying to keep everyone else alive. And in those cases, especially if I'm noticing that the very first time this happens in a dungeon, I notice the healer's health gets low, I'm going to think about that. And then the next time I'm going to use it on the healer to keep them alive a little bit. Now, this is dangerous, but it is something that you can do in Mythic Plus to help out with something like that. Also, if somebody just says it, maybe you're in Discord with them or something, they say, I have nothing. You could just throw it on them and hope you both live, right? So it is good just to have in Mythic Plus. Next, Sanctified Plates. You're going to want 2 points in this no matter what. Blessing Protection. I always run this for Mythic Plus as well. Why? Because it can remove stuns. You can pop Taunt. You can do all kinds of utility things. You can take off bleeds. All kinds of things you can do with Blessing Protection. I would say it's almost mandatory in Mythic Plus. Healing Hands, we mostly take this for our own survival and also because it works with our Guided Prayer over here on the ret side, but also it just helps you heal if you need to off heal. So Healing Hands, always a good talent to take there. Unbreakable Spirit. Here's a point that you don't need to take. Touch of Light is technically a DPS point, but the DPS is so low that if you want to grab more utility, you can easily remove this point. You could put this into Golden Path or something if you wanted. You could put this up here into Lightforged Blessing for your Divine Storm heal, right? This is just a little bit of damage, but I mean little bit of damage, right? This is getting removed in the Paladin thing. So like easily, right? Okay, I want to do more healing. I'm going to put it in Lightforged Blessing right now. And this is actually the build I'll link. So who cares about that one? It's getting removed anyways. We don't need it. We come down here, Seal of Might, Divine Purpose, Seal of Alacrity. We take of Dusk and Dawn, Divine Toll, 2 points in Seal of the Crusader. Again, this actually is not super important in Mythic Plus. This is just your auto attacks. And for AoE, it's not going to matter that much. It's going to lower your boss damage if you take them off. But these are 2 points you technically could move if you want to. You could move them to more utility. If you want to just be full utility, you could do that. Maybe you want your stun to be fully reduced with 2 points of Fist of Justice. You could do that. So I'm just giving you options if you want to do that. Down here, this is actually an option in Mythic Plus, I would say. Whereas in rating, it's really not. But you could do either of these. So Seal of Order. Sorry it's behind my camera, but I'll keep this up here so you can see it. Seal of Order is basically going to reduce your cooldown slightly of your abilities. And it's going to make you do more damage as well. And then Fading Light's going to make you do more damage, but it's actually going to put like a little shield on you as well. So it's a little bit more defensive. So this is definitely usable in Mythic Plus. Again, it's not, they nerfed the shield very heavily from when this first came out, but it's a little bit more defense, and you can definitely use this in Mythic Plus and be completely fine. It's not like rating where everything's on schedule all the time. Mythic Plus is very dynamic. That's the biggest difference. In a raid fight, as long as everything's going well, it's kind of scripted. In Mythic Plus, everything can be dynamic. Somebody could randomly die at any moment, and things just kind of go crazy. And you still want to recover it because you don't want to not time your key. So this is the Paladin side. Like I said, there's stuff you can play with here. 100%. I try to give you the points that you can play with. Some of your Divine Steed stuff, your Obduracy, Seal of the Crusader even though it is throughput. Those are types of things that you can play with and move around if you need to when the time comes. So let's go ahead and move on to the ret side. So it's just going to be the general AoE build here. This is going to be the same build you see pretty much everywhere. The only difference is, from some people, I have Final Reckoning over Execution Sentence. I highly recommend doing this. If you've seen some people playing with Execution Sentence, I really don't, think that that's the best bet. It can have benefits, priority damage on a Lieutenant mob, a little bit more boss damage. But for the AoE, basically anytime you're going to pull multiple things together, Final Reckoning is going to be king when it comes to this, right? And so it's going to surpass. So if you and another Ret Paladin of the same skill and the same gear go into a dungeon and everything is pulled one pack at a time, one of you has Final Reckoning, one of you have Execution Sentence, it's going to be very, very close. But let's say you do one pull of 2 or 3 packs with Bloodlust. The Final Reckoning person is going to win that dungeon by like 100 or 200,000 DPS. And so that's kind of the difference, right? You're just going to do so much more on that big pull. And Execution Sentence cannot make up for that over the course of the dungeon, even with doing like a little bit more boss damage or a little bit more prio damage. So that's why I do that. There are arguments for prio damage over just mass damage, but I like mass damage personally, and that's what I go with. Other important notes over here. So let's just talk about important. Like I said, I will link the build. Let's talk about important things. So Crusade over Might. Now this is not as a big deal in Mythic Plus as it is in Raid. So Crusade is clearly better in Raid, but in Mythic Plus, crit, like I said earlier, crit has a little bit more value. So Might can be good in Mythic Plus. I imagine if you sim it yourself, even regardless, so like if I sim on my character, it's going to say Crusade's better. I imagine that's going to be the case even if you have different gear than me, but you know, it's going to be close. So Might is an option here. It's not something you can't use by any means. Crusade and Might are both usable. Crusade should probably sim more for you personally, but you won't be holding your team back or whatever if you play with Might. It'll be less boss damage for sure, and it'll likely be a little bit less damage on AoE, although not as drastic. Another kind of important note to talk about here is Radiant Glory. So we'll talk briefly about the tier sets. They're not super impactful for anything, let alone Mythic Plus. But Radiant Glory basically turns your Avenging Wrath, so you no longer have an Avenging Wrath button. It turns your Wake of Ashes into your Avenging Wrath. So you do the damage with the Wake of Ashes. You get the wings with the Wake of Ashes. That's what I just did earlier when I activated my son's avatar to show you the hero talent. So why are we using this? It doesn't line up with Final Reckoning every time. The reason why we use this is mostly because of our tier set bonus, but also it is just very good to have wings for every single pack. It just truly is good to have that. So with this, basically every 30 seconds you get your wings, right? It's a shorter wings. It's not as powerful, but it's like 75% as powerful, and you get 2 of them in a minute, basically. Think of it like that. And so obviously that adds up to more than 100%, and so it's better to use. This is of course buffed by a tier set, which we will talk about as well. But I know a lot of people don't like this talent. It's a very confrontational talent. There's a lot of Rets who love it. There's a lot of Rets who hate it. It's literally like 50-50, at least in my experience with people who view my videos. And so it is better. Again, in Mythic Plus setting, you won't lose as much depending on how long your pulls take. So if you're doing a high enough key to where your pulls are taking 50 seconds, well, you won't lose as much because you're still going to have a wings up for every single pull. But if your pulls are taking closer to like low 30s or something like that, right? A low 30-second pull, then all of a sudden Radiant Glory becomes a lot better because you can hold it for like the last 5% of their health, go to the next pack and automatically have it, and go to the next pack and automatically have it, and go to the next pack and automatically have it. So a lot of people don't factor this in Mythic Plus, but your fight time per pack matters, right, on your choices. And so it's going to be closer. Somebody might say, well, I'm using 1 minute Might and it's doing really well for me. I'm the top damage. And I would say, well, your packs are probably being pulled in a way that has the perfect timing for that. Or you would just do more damage with Radiant Glory and you don't want to, would be what I would say to that personally. So that's an important note as well. Other than that, we will link the build below. We are using Crusader Strike Auto Attack. I know that's another like a confrontational talent. And then Shield of Vengeance. That's kind of obvious, I would think. But like I said, I'll link these below. And I try not to go too long on the talents because you could literally talk for hours about each talent and why you use it and what it does. And I think it's just too much, honestly, for one video. Next up, let's talk about the new Xal'atath affixes, okay? So they're called Xal'atath's Bargains, and these only go up to plus 11, I think. And then once you get to 12, there's no more of these, and you're just pushing high keys with tons of damage on you. But if you're doing anything lower than that, which is mostly for what this video is for, you're going to have these affixes, right? And so let's start with this week. So there's 4 of these to go through, and how do we handle these? So the first one this week is Ascendant. Xal'atath's Bargain Ascendancy or Ascendant or something like that. So for this one, there's going to be little orbs that spawn. So imagine I'm fighting this dummy here, and there's just these little orbs that are casting, and they fall down from the sky. There's going to be about 10 of them, so you want to wait till they all spawn. If you only get like 8 of them, that's fine. You might want to plan this out with your team or whatever, but this is... we're already going to take Blinding Light anyways, but this is a big reason to take Blinding Light, okay? You need to take this on any week where it's Ascendant. So when, let's say all these orbs spawn, I see 8 to 10 of these orbs at least, right? And I'm just going to stand in the middle of them, and I'm going to Blinding Light, and it's going to evaporate them all, and it's going to give me and my group a haste buff. Now you'll want someone else to have you will not have this up for every set. You'll have this up for every other set of these Ascendant orbs that come out. And so that's how you handle these as a ret. You want to have your Blinding Light, stand in the middle, and use it. Try to coordinate it with your team if you can, but generally speaking, you can get every other one yourself. You need someone else in your group to be able to get one if you do not want to be affected by that. Next up, let's talk about Voidbound. So Voidbound is one mob that spawns, and it has no health, but a giant shield on it. We are very good for this, because why? Because most of the time in the Mythic Plus, we have our wings running, because we are playing 30-second wings. So you could literally, you know, just pop your Wake of Ashes on it. You want to get this thing killed, it gives you CDR, cooldown reduction, so it's going to like pop up your stuff back up anyways. And just go to town on this thing. Make it your main target. You can still cleave off of it if your group can handle that. But if not, you just go to town on this thing. As a ret, you have insane priority damage compared to most specs. And you can just go to town and switch targets and kill this thing. It's called Voidbound. I don't know what week that'll be, but it's just one mob. It spawns on the tank. So wherever the tank's standing, it's going to spawn on him or her. And you're going to just destroy this thing and get the buff. Next up, let's talk about Oblivion. This is the easiest one by far. Oblivion is just globs of goo, I guess, and they just slowly go towards the mobs, right? They spawn on the outside, and they slowly go, and all you do is soak them. You just soak the orbs. That's it. You just run around soaking orbs. As melee, you know, you're the last line of defense, you in the tank, and you're going to just soak orbs. Make sure none of them touch the mobs. Just soak up the orbs, get the buff. Very, very simple for Oblivion. And last is Devour. So for Devour, we're going to use our Cleanse Toxins ability. You'll want this for some dungeons anyways. But basically, everybody in your party is going to get this debuff on them. It's magic dispellable. It's poison dispellable. It's disease dispellable. It's if you have a dispel, you can dispel it. And so what I advise you doing is probably just dispelling yourself. So your healer doesn't have to worry about it. You can also heal it off. So as soon as it spawns on you, just press your cleanse. It'll take it right off. If your healer specifically wants you to do somebody else, I guess you can do that for them, of course, right? You can be kind and do that. But we're just going to take it off. We're just going to cleanse toxins. It's going to be a little absorb shield on your health bar here. It'll just look like a light color green where all the absorb is at. So let's say like up here where my health bar is, it's this color green. Now imagine half of it is like a lighter color green. That shows that you have like health absorb on the standard Blizzard frames. It's just going to show that you have a health absorb. You boom, just take it off with your cleanse toxins. It's that simple. So only two major things for ret specifically, and that's just cleanse toxin and blinding light for this week's Ascendant. This is the first week. I'm making this the first week of Mythic Plus. If this doesn't age well, its Ascendant is the first week. Next up, let's talk about abilities and rotational stuff and stuff like that. If you want a fuller guide for single target, so your boss damage, this is going to be the one time I think I recommend watching the guide. I'm mostly going to focus on the AoE stuff for the purposes of this video. You can kind of figure out what to do for single target on your own. It's not hard. None of this is hard as far as Mythic Plus goes. But basically, you can go in with 0 holy power if you want. We're going to start the pack. We're going to let the tank get aggro if we're going to start this way. Let's say we're worried about aggro. So we're worried about aggro from our tank. So I'm going to Blade, I'm going to Judgment, and then I'm going to Divine Storm, okay? So that's because I'm worried about threat. If I'm not worried about threat, I'm not going to worry about starting all that stuff first. If I'm not worried about threat at all, and I just know my tank's going to hold threat no matter how much damage I do, I'm just going to come straight in here. So I can start that way and then go into this, or I could just start with this. And I'm just going to Wake of Ashes, I'm going to Final Reckoning, I'm going to Divine Storm until I have lower holy power, then I'm going to Divine Toll, and I'm just going to keep Divine Storming more and more and more and more. Okay, and now we'll talk about the ability priority after that. So that's kind of like your opener. So you can either do a soft open to let your tank get threat, or you can just hard open. And the hard open is going to be Wake of Ashes, into Final Reckoning, spam Divine Storms, Divine Toll, spam Divine Storms, and now we'll talk about after that. So after that, what you're going to want to focus on a lot is your Blade of Justice, because this is going to hit everything, right? So you can see even on top of these mobs, they each have Expurg on them. They're all burning, so it's hitting them all and it's burning them all. So Expurg is good. Now Judgment's also good, but it's not because of our mastery, but it's not as good in AoE as it is in single target. But it still does give you 2 holy power with the way that we're spec'd right now. So Judgment's going to be your next choice. Now, all that kind of gets thrown out the middle when you have this weak aura pop up. If you see above my bars, my Hammer of Wrath is really lit up above my bars. That means that I currently have Blessing of Anchi. So I'm going to use Hammer of Wrath, and even with no buffs or no wings, I did 867k by pressing that. It's a lot of damage, and when other stuff's rolling, it can do a lot more damage as well. So you can press that button interweaved in there as well, especially when it procs. Okay, so if you're, like I said earlier in the talent portion, if you can play with the weak aura, then you're going to want to use this, and then you'll want to weave that into your abilities. But other than that, you're going to be using Blades, Divine Storming, Judgments, Divine Storming, back into Blades, and Divine Storming, more Blade, okay, Judgment, Divine Storming. Now I have a Blessing of Anchi proc. I'm going to Blessing of Anchi. Now I'm going to Divine Storm some more. Now I'm back into Blades, okay? And when it comes to using your Wake of Ashes again, just if the mobs are almost dead, probably hold. If the mobs still have like 25-30% health, probably just go ahead and use it again. You just go right into the same pack. Maybe you don't get to start the next pack with it, but you just want to get as many uses as possible, right? That's basically what we're doing for overall damage, is we're getting as many uses out of our abilities as possible. And that's generally how you're going to play every single pack. When it comes to doing single target, we just don't press Divine Storm. We press Final Verdict, and we care more about Judgment than Blade of Justice because of our mastery on our Judgment. And Blessing of Anchi is, again, still is even better on single target than it is during any AoE situation. So that's kind of like a broad, quick way to say the single target, and hopefully that demonstration for the AoE was good enough. Let's quickly talk about the tier set. So our tier sets are not that interesting or that good. 2 set just increases our Blade of Justice damage and our Wake of Ashes damage. And then the 4 set makes our Wake of Ashes cause us to do more damage. So that's why we use Radiant Glory. I mean, it's good without it. But every time we press Wake of Ashes, we get a buff. So imagine using your Wake of Ashes without Radiant Glory. So now you just get a little bit of a buff, but you're not feeding into that. You're not like doubling up. You're not exponentially increasing it by having wings going as well. You're just getting this little buff. And so when you compare things together, it does more damage, right? And so that it's a big reason why, but it's not the only reason why. Right now, Radiant Glory might be overtuned, honestly. But for Season 1, because it goes with the tier set, you know, they're not going to nerf it because it literally goes with the tier set. and they already made the tier set, and they're not changing the tier set. So that's the biggest thing there with the tier set, is it kind of locks us into Radiant Glory, at least for Season 1. Next up, let's talk about trinkets. So when it comes to Mythic Plus, now both trinkets I'm going to mention are both good for raid as well. But what makes it a little bit different is I love using on-use trinkets in Mythic Plus. Why? Especially, you know, if they don't line up perfectly with each other, you know, you can use one for each pack, right? Obviously, you can use them on bosses as well. But almost always having a trinket out for a pack is just so much damage. Trinkets hold a lot of power. Now, passive trinkets sometimes are very powerful. When it comes to Season 1 of The War Within, only one really standout passive trinket, which is Arakara Sackbrood, and it's not that good for AoE situations, so it's not the best thing to use in Mythic Plus. Now, I'm still using it right now because I don't have any other better option, but the trinkets that we're going to want to focus on, the main 2, are on-use trinkets, and they are Mark of Kardros. This is number 1 for Mythic Plus. This drops in Grim Batol, obviously if you're doing Mythic Plus, just off the final cache. If you can get a high one in your vault, that's great too. Mark of Kardros is extremely strong on use mastery. And then from Stone Vault, the Skarmorak Shard is also very powerful on use. And this is from Stone Vault. Increased mastery for us, right? Mastery being so good, high mastery, and we just go crazy as we pop these. You can macro this into like your Wake of Ashes if you want, these trinkets, or one of the trinkets. macro one of them into your final reckoning or something as well. Those are options for you. I like to play with mine not like that personally, but that is something that you can do if you choose to, is macroing your trinkets into your abilities. So you want to use these on every pack that you can and on use trinkets. So there are other good on-use trinkets. There's also some bad ones. A lot of the other Mythic Plus ones are not that good. There's a meat hook, I believe, from Necrotic Wake that's kind of good. Like, it just does damage, but it's not as good. Just like the Queen's Mandate, right? It does a ton of damage, so it's still good, but it's not as good. And when it comes to raid trinkets, again, there's nothing as good as these two, especially for Mythic Plus, which is going to be Mark of Kardros and Skarmorak Shard. So target those. If you get another on-use trinket for now, just use it, right? Obviously use the best thing you have for now. But that's going to be your end goal, right? Your best in slot. You're going to be wanting to get those two, again, to do the most possible damage. If you're having an issue where you need more single target damage, or to kill a void bound or whatever, and you want to use something like the Queen's Mandate from a new Berserk, from the raid. So it's just the Queen's Mandate trinket or whatever. If you wanted to do that, you could do that, right? Obviously, you can do whatever you want, but I'm just telling you kind of do the most damage here. Next up, let's move to Embellishments. So this is kind of a weird one because the embellishments are not that strong, so it's not really hyper important what embellishments you use, but it's also, obviously, you want to have your gear embellished. So you want to put these on the least stat slots as possible. That's going to be like your bracers, your cloak. However, maybe you want to, if you want to use a weapon one, we'll talk about that. So there's the Dawnlight Threading. This gives you crit while you're at above a certain % health. If you're always low health, which is possible in Mythic Plus, there's a Elemental Lens or Focus Lens or something like that. That one's also good. It's not good, but it does damage, I guess you'd say. Probably the most impactful one is the Dark Moon Sigil Ascension. However, this requires you to craft a weapon, and then like on your bracers, you would put the what's it called? Let me see. I have it written down here. The Writhing Armor Banding. You would put like that on your bracers, and that one's really, really strong. Well, none of them are really, really strong. It's strong in comparison, but it requires you to have a crafted weapon, which could require you to have a lower item level weapon than normal. So losing item level on your weapon is not the best thing to do. So I don't recommend it, but it is definitely an option because it is a good embellishment to have. So you could use the Dark Moon Ascension, I believe it's called. Dark Moon Ascension, and then Writhing Armor Banding on another slot like your bracers. So that is an option. Those are basically the three options I would focus with. There's a versatility one that's kind of like Dawnlight. However, again, if you're having trouble keeping your health above 80%, maybe the versatility will help you do that. But generally speaking, if you're already taking damage, then you're not going to get the defensive benefit of the versatility anyways. So I would be kind of weary about using that one, but it at least would stop you from getting one shot maybe. So that's an option. When it comes to consumables, pretty straightforward here. We're going to use strength food. We're going to use Iron Claw whetstones or weight stones. We are going to use Flask of Mastery or Flask of Tempered Chaos. Or not Tempered Chaos, Alchemical Chaos. Flask of Tempered Mastery or Flask of Alchemical Chaos. So I'm going to go with Mastery myself for most of this expansion, I imagine. Chaos can basically low roll you into a bad outcome, but most of the time, because our stats are not super high in Season 1, Chaos will roll you into a high roll, or not a high roll, but just something that's going to help you a lot. So it's actually kind of similar in power to Mastery, but specifically for Season 1 early on, it very well could just be better, the Alchemical Chaos. However, later on in the expansion, when our haste is basically capped and our crit is basically capped, Mastery is going to be pretty much the only stat we want to gain, and that's when I think that Tempered Mastery will just always be the best option. I'm already using it because of that. I used Verse File all of Dragonflight just because, generally speaking, it was the best option. But if you want to be really min-max right now, you can do Alchemical Chaos, and many times it'll roll you higher than Mastery. So those are the two options, though. And then when it comes to potion, tempered potions are pretty much the best potions to use in most cases. So just the tempered potion, they're very, I think it's just the common potion. It's just like the potion of power from Dragonflight, just the standard potion. When it comes to enchants, just very simple on the enchants. We're going to have mastery on our rings. We're going to have either Defender's March or Defender's something else on our boots. I can't remember what the other one is, but it's either stamina or speed. I actually like I like the stamina one personally, but you can put speed on your boots. You want to put the strength and stamina on your legs for your leg. It's not an enchant, but it's like the leatherworking stuff right there on your legs. We'll do weapon last. We want avoidance on our bracers and cloak. We want strength on our chest. And on when it comes to our weapon, most cases for your most overall damage, the Stonebound Artistry will do the most, which is what I have on mine right now. It's rank 1, but Stonebound Artistry will do the most. That's a mastery proc. However, the one from the raid, which is called Authority of the Depths, is also really good. It might do a little bit more boss damage and basically become even with the mastery one. The mastery one's going to be a little bit better on the AoE, and the Authority of the Depths will probably be a little bit better on boss. It's up to you which one you want to use. I'm probably going to stick with Artistry with the mastery, but again, that's very close. There's a lot of stuff that's very close, and you can kind of choose which one you want to use. And then when it comes to gems, you want like a main stat gem, of course. I have main stat plus critical strike effect. And then when it comes to your other gems after your main stat, you're going to want mastery plus haste in almost every scenario. Maybe later on in the expansion that won't be the case, but we will do a guide for each patch, so it won't matter. You're going to want mastery main plus haste. So it's called like Onyx or something like that. A quick Onyx maybe it's called. Onyx being the mastery, and then the quick being the haste. So, but big number mastery, low number haste for the gems. So, I think that's about it when it comes to Mythic Plus. Hopefully this gets everybody ready. I'm having fun so far. Mythic Plus, haven't done as many keys as I would have liked so far, but hopefully we'll get my KSM today. This is the 3rd day of the season when I'm making this video. So hopefully get my KSM today. And you know, I'm having a lot of fun. Ret is pumping. I do max damage nearly every single dungeon I do, unless I'm with a really skilled player on another really good spec. So Ret's really fun. I'm having a blast and having fun doing keys, which is something I've been doing for the last few seasons, I would say. So I'm getting more into Mythic Plus, I would say. So that'll be it for this one, guys. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. If you're already a subscriber, I encourage you to check out the Patreon. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.